You know when you're 82 years old and your own children start whispering about you like you're not in the room? Well, that's when you realize something's gone terribly wrong. My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and I've lived in this same Charleston house for 43 years. The azaleas I planted as a young bride now tower over the front porch, and the live oak in my backyard has weathered 17 hurricanes. I thought my family was just as rooted, just as strong. I was wrong. This morning started like every other Thursday. I made my coffee in the same china cup I've used since 1965, the one with tiny blue roses that Harold gave me for our second anniversary. The phone sat silent on the kitchen counter. Greg was supposed to call at 9. Lisa promised she'd stop by after her yoga class. 9:30 came and went.
Then 10.
By 11 I'd reorganized my spice cabinet twice and watered plants that didn't need watering. You see, I spent 40 years as head librarian at Charleston County Library. I organized information for a living, helped people find what they needed, remembered every patron's favorite authors. But somehow I couldn't organize my own children's lives enough to make room for their mother. When Lisa finally arrived at noon, she was checking her phone before she'd even hugged me hello. "Sorry, Mama," she said, not looking up. Traffic was horrible. Traffic. In Charleston. At noon on a Thursday, as if I'd forgotten what traffic looked like in my own city. Greg showed up 20 minutes later with that familiar expression, the one that says he's calculating how much time this visit will cost him. My oldest child, my firstborn, treating his mother like a client meeting. "How are you feeling, Mom?" he asked, but his eyes were already scanning my living room, noting the books I'd stacked on the coffee table, the newspaper folded to yesterday's crossword. "I'm fine, Gregory." I've called him Gregory when I'm annoyed since he was 7 years old. Some things don't change. But Lisa was whispering to Greg in my own kitchen, thinking the running water would cover their voices. That's when I heard it. Those 3 words that changed everything. She's slowing down. Slowing down, as if I were a clock losing time, a car that couldn't keep up with traffic anymore. As if 82 years of life experience, 4 decades of professional expertise, and enough wisdom to fill that library I used to run, had somehow made me less. I stood there by my kitchen window, looking out at the garden Harold and I planted together, listening to my daughter discuss my decline like I was a problem to be solved. That evening, after they'd left with their hurried kisses and promises to check in soon, I sat in Harold's old reading chair and opened a book, but the words blurred together, not from failing eyesight, but from tears I refused to shed. 43 years ago, I took out a second mortgage on this house to pay for Greg's MBA at Wharton. 15 years ago, I emptied my savings account to help Lisa with her down payment. And 10 years ago, when Joey's divorce lawyer demanded a retainer, I sold my mother's antique jewelry to keep my youngest son out of jail. But sure, I'm slowing down. The next morning, Greg called. "Mum, we need to talk about your living situation." My living situation. Not "how are you" or "what would make you happy." Just my living situation. "What about it, Gregory?" "Lisa and I think it might be time to consider options for your safety." My safety. In the house where I've lived safely for 43 years. In the neighborhood where Mrs. Patterson still brings me tomatoes from her garden and young Tommy Morrison mows my lawn without being asked. "I see," I said, and I did see. Clearer than I had in months. "We've scheduled a family meeting for Sunday, just to discuss everything." A family meeting. About me. Without me. After I hung up, I walked to my bedroom closet and pulled down the old hat box from the top shelf. Inside, beneath Harold's letters and our wedding photos, was the key to our safety deposit box. I hadn't opened it in years, but suddenly I remembered what was inside, and I smiled for the first time in weeks. They thought I was slowing down. They had no idea I was about to speed up. You know what's funny about betrayal? It always comes dressed up as love. Sunday evening, I put on my best dress, the navy blue one, with pearl buttons that Harold always said brought out my eyes. I even wore lipstick. Silly me, thinking my children had invited me to a family dinner. I should have known something was wrong when I walked up Greg's driveway and saw Lisa's car, Mark's SUV, and an unfamiliar silver Mercedes company. At a family dinner, for my 82nd birthday month, no less. I used my key, the one Greg gave me 3 years ago for emergencies, and stepped into his foyer. That's when I heard Greg's voice carrying from the dining room, confident and cold as winter rain. Look, we can't keep pretending she's managing. Yesterday she called me twice, asking about the same doctor's appointment. I froze. They weren't talking about someone else's mother. But what if she refuses? That was Lisa. My sweet Lisa, sounding worried. Not worried about me, worried about their plan. She won't have a choice, Greg replied. Mark's already researched the legal aspects. With power of attorney, we can— The Magnolia Manor has an opening next month, interrupted a voice I didn't recognize. Female, professional, cheerful in that practiced way. A sales voice. It's perfect for seniors who need guidance. Guidance. As if I were a lost child instead of the woman who guided Greg through college algebra and Lisa through her divorce. I should have announced myself right then. Should have walked into that dining room with my head high and demanded to know what was happening. But something kept my feet planted on that Persian rug, the same rug I'd helped Greg pick out when he bought this house with the money from my mother's estate sale. What about Joey? Lisa asked. Shouldn't we tell him? Greg's laugh was harsh. Joey hasn't called her in 6 months. He's got his own problems. Besides, this is about what's practical, not what's sentimental. Practical. My life had become a practical problem. The thing is, Greg continued, and I heard his chair creak as he leaned forward, she's got all these assets tied up in that house, in those old accounts Harold set up. It's not doing anyone any good just sitting there. Assets. Not memories. Not my home. Assets. Mark's voice chimed in, my son-in-law who calls me Mrs. W, because he can't be bothered to remember my name. The real estate market in her neighborhood is hot right now. Historic district properties are going for triple what they paid in the 80s. Exactly, Greg said. And frankly, at her age, what does she need with all that space? All that responsibility? That's when he said it. The words that burned themselves into my memory like a brand. Put her in a home. She's useless now anyway. Useless. 43 years of marriage. 38 years of motherhood. 4 decades of professional service to my community. Useless. I don't remember backing out of that house. I don't remember driving home. I only remember sitting in my kitchen at 9 o'clock that night, staring at the phone, waiting for it to ring with some explanation, some invitation to the family dinner I'd missed. It never rang. I went to bed that night, but didn't sleep. Instead, I lay there thinking about 1987, when Greg's startup failed, and he came crying to Harold and me. Just a loan, Dad. Just until I get back on my feet. $40,000. Harold's entire retirement bonus from the shipping company. I thought about 2010, when Lisa's husband left her and she couldn't make the house payments. Please, Mama, I can't lose everything. I emptied my savings account, the one I'd been building since 1965, to save her everything. I thought about 2015, when Joey's ex-wife threatened to take his children away if he couldn't pay her lawyer. Mum, I know it's a lot to ask. So I sold my mother's wedding ring, her china set, the antique secretary desk that had been in our family for 3 generations. Useless. The woman who sacrificed her career to raise their children. The woman who worked double shifts at the library to pay for Greg's college. The woman who took out loans against her house to save their marriages, their businesses, their futures. Useless. At 3 in the morning I got up and went to Harold's desk. In the bottom drawer, behind old tax returns and warranty papers, I found what I was looking for: our marriage license, the house deed, and the key to our safety deposit box at First National Bank. Harold always said I was too trusting. Ellie, he'd tell me, you give everyone the benefit of the doubt, even when they've stopped deserving it. He was right, but Harold had also taught me something else. Documentation, Ellie, always keep documentation. So I did. Every cancelled check, every loan agreement, every receipt, 40 years of being the family's financial backup plan, all documented and filed away like the good librarian I'd been. At dawn I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table with Harold's old address book. I found the number I was looking for. Maya Chen, the young lawyer Harold, had hired to update our wills 5 years ago, the one Greg and Lisa had never met. The one they didn't know I'd been talking to every month since Harold died. I dialed her number and left a message. Maya, dear, this is Eleanor Whitmore. I need to schedule an appointment. It seems my family has made some decisions about my future. I paused, looking out at Harold's garden, at the life we'd built together. It's time I made some decisions about theirs. When you've been underestimated your entire life, you learn to keep your cards close to your chest. Harold taught me that in poker, my children were about to learn it in life. Monday morning I dressed carefully, my grey wool suit, the one I used to wear to city council meetings when the library's budget was under attack. Maya Chen's office was downtown on Broad Street, in one of those gorgeous old Charleston buildings that tourists photograph but never really see. Maya greeted me with the same warm smile she'd had 5 years ago, though now there were slight lines around her eyes. Success will do that to you. Mrs. Whitmore, it's wonderful to see you again. Though I have to admit, your message sounded intriguing. Maya, dear, I need you to help me understand exactly what I own. She raised an eyebrow. You mean beyond what's in your current will? I mean everything. Every property, every account, every trust. Harold's setup that my children don't know about. Maya's expression shifted to pure professional focus. I see. Should I ask why? Because they've decided I'm useless, and they're planning to put me in a nursing home so they can liquidate my assets. The words sounded different when I said them out loud, stronger, more real. Maya pulled out a thick file folder. Let's start with the properties. Properties. Plural. Even I had forgotten how much Harold had quietly accumulated over the years. The main residence on Rutledge Avenue, of course, Maya began, spreading documents across her mahogany desk. But also the rental property on King Street, the one above Palmer's Antiques, and the small warehouse Harold bought in 1995 that's now in the Arts District. I stared at the papers.
The warehouse?
Currently leased to a ceramics studio for $2,000 a month, has been for 6 years. Maya smiled. Your late husband was quite the businessman, Mrs. Whitmore. He just never made a show of it. Harold, still taking care of me, even from the grave. Then there are the municipal bonds, Maya continued, pulling out another folder. The ones from your uncle's estate that have been quietly accumulating interest for 15 years. My Uncle Robert, the one who never married, never had children, and left everything to his favourite niece who actually read books. $2.3 million in Charleston municipal bonds, paying a steady 4% annually. Money my children had never known existed. Maya, I said slowly, what would happen if someone tried to force me into a nursing home? Legally, they'd need to prove you're incompetent, but even then, your power of attorney would only cover what they know about. And what they don't know about. Maya's smile was sharp as winter sunlight. Remains entirely under your control. We spent 2 hours going through everything. Harold's life insurance policies that had never been claimed, dividend payments from stocks he'd bought in companies I'd never heard of, a small trust fund he'd established for our grandchildren who barely called their grandmother anymore. I want to make some changes, I told Maya. What kind of changes? I want to add a clause to my will. If any of my children attempt to have me declared incompetent or force me into institutional care against my will, they forfeit their inheritance entirely. Maya paused, pen hovering over her legal pad. That's comprehensive. I'm a librarian, dear. I believe in comprehensive documentation. We drafted the language carefully, not vengeful. Maya was careful about that, but firm, crystal clear, the kind of legal document that would hold up in any court, under any scrutiny. There's one more thing, I said as we finished. I want to establish a medical directive that specifically names someone other than my children as my healthcare proxy. Do you have someone in mind? I thought about Mrs. Patterson, who still brought me vegetables from her garden. About Tommy Morrison, who insisted on mowing my lawn every Saturday. About the community I'd served for 40 years. The community that still saw me as Eleanor Whitmore, head librarian, not Eleanor Whitmore, burden. Not yet, but I will. That evening, I sat in Harold's chair with a cup of tea and our old photo albums. Pictures of Greg's graduation, Lisa's wedding, Joey in his military uniform, pictures of birthday parties I'd hosted, Christmas mornings I'd orchestrated, family vacations I'd planned and paid for. Useless. That's what Greg had called me. I turned to a photo from 1999, Lisa crying on my shoulder after her first miscarriage, me holding her like she was still my little girl. Another from 2003, Greg standing proudly in front of his new office, the one he'd been able to afford after Harold and I co-signed his business loan. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dollar stretched and saved and given away to secure their futures. Useless. I closed the album and reached for the phone. There was one more call to make. "Joey," I said when he answered on the fourth ring. "It's your mother." Silence. Then Mom, "Is everything okay? You never call this late." "I'm fine, sweetheart. I wanted to hear your voice." More silence. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "I'm sorry I haven't called more. Work's been crazy, and the kids have been... Joey, do you think I'm useless?" "What? Mum? Where is this coming from? Just answer me, sweetheart. Honestly." "Jesus, Mum, you're the strongest person I know. You literally saved my life when Sarah tried to take the kids. How could you even think?" He paused. "Who told you that?" And that's when I knew I had one ally left in this family, one child who still remembered who I really was. "Nobody, sweetheart. I was just wondering." But as I hung up the phone, I wasn't wondering anymore. I was planning. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born with. I was about to learn that lesson at 82 years old. Clara Martinez arrived on a Wednesday morning with a smile that reminded me of sunshine and a bag full of medical supplies I didn't need. Greg had arranged for wellness checks, his way of documenting my decline, I'm sure. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm Clara from Coastal Home Health." She was young, maybe 27, with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of real work, not the soft office hands my children had inherited. "Please, dear, call me Eleanor. Would you like some tea?" She looked surprised. Usually my clients want to get the checkup over with as quickly as possible. "I'm not usual," I told her, and she laughed. A real laugh, not the polite chuckle I got from Greg and Lisa. While the tea steeped, Clara looked around my living room. Her eyes lingered on Harold's bookshelves, on the photographs of Joey in uniform, on the small collection of first-edition mysteries I'd accumulated over 40 years of library work. "You were a librarian," she said. "Not a question. Head librarian at Charleston County for 38 years. How did you know? The way you organize information. Your books aren't just collected, they're curated." She touched the spine of an old Agatha Christie. "My grandmother was the same way. She was a teacher in Puerto Rico before my family came here. And just like that, we weren't nurse and patient. We were two women who understood the value of knowledge, the dignity of education, the respect that comes from serving your community." "Tell me about your grandmother," I said, pouring the tea. For the next hour, Clara forgot about blood pressure cuffs and medication charts. She told me about Isabella Martinez, who taught mathematics in San Juan until she was 75. About how she'd raised Clara after her parents died in a car accident. About the sacrifices that had put Clara through nursing school. "She died last year," Clara said softly. "Right before I graduated. I wish she could have seen me in my cap and gown." "Oh, sweetheart, she did see you. Grandmothers always see their grandchildren's triumphs, even from heaven." That's when Clara started crying. Quiet tears that spoke of grief, still fresh, and love still strong. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her eyes. "I don't usually, my other clients don't really want to know about your life." She nodded. "Well, I do. Come back on Friday, and we'll have proper lunch. I'll show you my grandmother's recipe for shrimp and grits." Clara became my weekly visitor, then my twice-weekly visitor, then my friend. She had a 3-year-old daughter, Sophia, and a part-time job at the community college where she was working toward her bachelor's degree. She was everything my children weren't: grateful, ambitious, genuinely caring about the people around her. 3 weeks into our friendship, I made a decision. "Clara, how familiar are you with estate planning?" We were sitting in my kitchen, Sophia coloring at the table, while Clara helped me organize my recipe collection. The little girl called me Abuela Eleanor, Grandmother Eleanor, and it filled something in my heart I hadn't realized was empty. Not very, Clara admitted. Why? Because I think it's time you learned. Part of real financial security is understanding how wealth passes from one generation to the next. I started slowly, showing her how to read property deeds, explaining the difference between wills and trusts, teaching her about the power of compound interest. Clara absorbed it all like a sponge, asking intelligent questions, taking careful notes. "Mrs. Eleanor," she said one afternoon, "why are you teaching me all this?" "Because knowledge is power, dear, and because you remind me of someone I used to be." That same week, I quietly made another change to my will. Clara Martinez became my healthcare proxy, with explicit instructions that no medical decisions were to be made without her approval. Maya Chen filed the papers with the same efficient discretion she'd shown for 5 years. On Thursday, while Sophia napped on my couch and Clara studied for her anatomy test, my phone rang. "Mum, how are the wellness checks going?" Greg's voice, casual but probing. "Oh, they're fine, dear. Clara's very professional. And she's documenting everything? Your medication compliance, your cognitive function?" Clara looked up from her textbook, one eyebrow raised. I put the phone on speaker. "Of course, Gregory. She's very thorough." "Good, because Lisa and I have been talking, and we really think we need to accelerate our timeline for your transition." Transition. As if I were a company being sold, not a human being with choices. Clara's expression darkened. She'd heard enough of these conversations to understand what was happening. "I see," I said calmly. "And what does this acceleration involve?" "We've scheduled a meeting with the people from Magnolia Manor next week, just to discuss options." Without asking if I want to discuss options. Silence. Then, "Mum, we're trying to do what's best for you." "Gregory, I'm 82 years old. I think I can decide what's best for myself." "Can you, though? Really?" Clara's face went white. She grabbed a piece of paper and scribbled something, sliding it across the table to me. "I can record this if you want." I nodded. Clara pulled out her phone and started recording. "What do you mean by that, Gregory?" "I mean, you called me 3 times last week, asking about the same doctor's appointment. You left the stove on overnight Tuesday. Mrs. Patterson mentioned you seemed confused when she visited. Every word a lie. Every accusation designed to build a case for my incompetence." "I see," I said again. "And you've discussed this with Lisa?" "Of course, we're in agreement. It's time, Mum." Clara held up the phone, still recording, and mouthed the words, "Keep him talking." "Time for what, exactly?" "Time to admit you can't live alone anymore. Time to let us help you make the right decision." "And if I disagree with your idea of the right decision?" Another pause. Then Greg's voice, colder now. "Then we'll have to explore other options. Other options. Legal options. Guardianship. Forced institutionalization." Clara stopped recording and immediately began typing on her phone. "Well, Gregory, I appreciate you letting me know your feelings. I'll certainly consider everything you've said." After I hung up, Clara looked at me with fire in her eyes. "Mrs. Eleanor, that man is planning to railroad you." "Yes, dear, I believe he is." "What are we going to do about it?" "We, not you, we." And that's when I knew I'd found my real family. You know what they say about leading lambs to slaughter. Sometimes the lamb knows exactly where it's going. The intervention was scheduled for 2 o'clock on a Saturday at Greg's house. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing my most vulnerable-looking outfit, a soft cardigan, comfortable shoes, and my reading glasses hanging from a chain. I even brought my old purse, the one with the broken clasp, that made me look scattered. If they wanted to see a declining old woman, I'd give them the performance of their lives. Greg answered the door with that false cheerfulness I'd come to recognize. "Mom, right on time. Come in. Come in." The living room was set up like a business meeting. Lisa sat on the couch with a box of tissues strategically placed beside her. Mark lounged in Harold's old chair, the one I'd given Greg after the funeral. And there, in the wingback chair by the window, sat a woman in a beige suit with a leather portfolio. "Mom, this is Nancy Richardson from Magnolia Manor," Greg said, guiding me to the chair they'd obviously selected for me, the one that was slightly lower than the others, the one that would make me look small. "Mrs. Whitmore," Nancy said, with that practiced warmth of professional caregivers. It's such a pleasure to meet you. Your children have told me so much about you. Have they? I settled into the chair and fumbled with my purse, letting a few tissues and my pill organizer spill onto the coffee table. Oh dear, I'm so clumsy these days. Lisa immediately leaned forward. It's okay, Mama. We're all here to help. Help. The word every predator uses before they strike. Nancy opened her portfolio. I understand you've been living alone since your husband passed. Yes, 3 years now. Though sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes I let my voice trail off, looking confused. I'm sorry, what were we talking about? Greg and Lisa exchanged a look. Mark made a note on his legal pad. We were talking about your living situation, Mrs. Whitmore, Nancy continued patiently. Your children are concerned about your safety. My safety? I blinked at them through my reading glasses. But I've lived in that house for 40 years. It's perfectly safe. Mum, Greg said gently, you left the stove on all night last Tuesday. Did I? I looked genuinely worried. I don't remember that. Another look between the siblings. Another note from Mark. Nancy pulled out a glossy brochure. Magnolia Manor is a beautiful facility. Mrs. Whitmore, you'd have your own apartment, restaurant-style dining, and 24-hour medical care. No more worrying about forgetting things or having accidents. It sounds lovely, I said, studying the pictures of smiling elderly people in matching cardigans. But I do love my garden and my books. And Mrs. Patterson brings me tomatoes every week. You could bring some books, Lisa said, her voice gentle but firm, and we could visit all the time. Visit like I was already dead and they were talking about coming to my grave. The thing is, Mom, Greg said, pulling out his own folder, we've prepared some paperwork that would make the transition easier. Power of attorney documents, so we can handle your finances and medical decisions. There it was. The real reason for this intervention. Oh, I said, reaching for the papers with trembling hands. His looked very official. They are, Mama, Lisa said. We just want to make sure you're taken care of. I pretended to read the documents, squinting and holding them at different angles. There's so much legal language. I don't understand half of it. That's exactly why we need to help you, Greg said. These things are complicated. Maybe I should have a lawyer look at them. I suggested hesitantly. Mum, we are looking at them, Mark said. I've reviewed everything. It's all standard. Standard. Documents that would sign away my autonomy, my property, my life decisions, all standard. I suppose I reached for the pen Greg was offering. Then, as if struck by a sudden thought, I fumbled for my phone. Oh, I should call Maya. Maya. Greg's voice sharpened slightly. Maya Chen, Harold's lawyer. She handles my affairs. I pretended to have trouble with the phone. I can never remember how to work this thing. Mum, you don't need to bother Maya with this, Lisa said quickly. Oh, but Harold always said to never sign anything without having Maya look at it first. I managed to dial Maya's number. Maya, dear, it's Eleanor. I'm at Gregory's house, and they have some papers they want me to sign. I put the phone on speaker, as if I didn't know how to use it properly. Eleanor, Maya's voice filled the room, professional and alert. What kind of papers? Power of attorney documents, Greg said, taking control of the conversation. We're helping Mom transition to assisted living. I see, Maya said coolly. And Eleanor, do you want to sign these documents? The room went silent. Everyone stared at me, waiting for my answer. I don't know, I said in a small voice. Everyone says it's for the best. Eleanor, Maya's voice was firm now. Do not sign anything without me reviewing it first. That's what Harold would want. Greg reached for the phone. Maya, with all due respect, Mom isn't really capable of making these decisions anymore. Is that so? Maya's tone could have frozen Charleston Harbor. And what medical evaluation led you to that conclusion? Silence. I'll be right over, Maya continued. Eleanor, don't sign anything until I get there. She hung up. Nancy Richardson suddenly looked uncomfortable. Perhaps we should reschedule once Mrs. Whitmore has had time to review everything with her attorney. That's not necessary, Greg said tightly. This is a family matter. Actually, I said, my voice stronger now, I think I would like Maya to look at these papers. Harold always said she was the smartest lawyer in Charleston. Lisa started crying. Real tears this time. Tears of frustration rather than manipulation. Mama, we're trying to help you. Why won't you let us help you? I looked at my daughter, my beautiful weak daughter, who had never learned to solve problems without involving other people's money, and felt something break inside my chest. Because, sweetheart, I said gently, I'm not sure your idea of helping is the same as mine. I stood up, steadier now, and gathered my purse. I think I'll go home and wait for Maya there. We can discuss this further once she's reviewed everything. As I walked to the door, I heard Greg whisper harshly to Lisa, "This is why we need to move faster." But I also heard Nancy Richardson say, "Mr. Whitmore, if your mother has legal counsel, we'll need to proceed much more carefully." Carefully? That was exactly what I was counting on. Because the lamb they thought they were leading to slaughter had just shown them her teeth. Harold used to say that chess wasn't about the pieces you capture. It's about the moves your opponent doesn't see coming. My children were about to learn why I'd beaten him at chess for 37 years straight. Monday morning I arrived at First National Bank at exactly 9 o'clock, wearing my navy suit and carrying Harold's old briefcase. The same briefcase he'd carried to board meetings at the shipping company for 25 years. Mrs. Whitmore, Janet Morrison, the branch manager, greeted me with genuine warmth. "It's been too long. How can we help you today?" "Janet, dear, I need to make some changes to my accounts. Remove some authorized users." Her expression shifted to professional concern. "Of course. Which accounts?" "All of them." Lisa had been authorized on my checking account since 2010, when I'd needed help managing bills after Harold's first heart attack. She'd used that access exactly 3 times in 13 years, all to help herself to loans she'd never repaid. "And I want to add someone new," I continued, pulling out the paperwork Maya had prepared. "Clara Martinez. Here's her information." Janet processed the changes without question. Professional discretion was one of the reasons Harold had banked here for 40 years. Next stop, Charleston County Courthouse. The property records office, where I'd spent countless hours researching historical documents for the library's genealogy project. The clerk, Patricia Wells, remembered me immediately. "Eleanor Whitmore, haven't seen you since you retired. What brings you down here?" "Just updating some beneficiary information." "Patricia, my lawyer filed the paperwork last week. The rental property on King Street, the one Lisa assumed would be hers someday, now had Clara Martinez listed as the primary beneficiary. The warehouse in the Arts District went to Joey, with a provision that he could only take possession if he maintained regular contact with me for at least 2 years. Greg got nothing. His name appeared exactly once in the new documents, specifically excluded from inheritance due to demonstrated hostility toward the grantor's autonomy and dignity. Tuesday brought a phone call that made me smile. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is David Chen at First National, Janet's nephew, who worked in commercial lending. We had someone try to access information about your accounts yesterday, but they're not authorized anymore." "That's correct, David." "Who was asking?" "A Gregory Whitmore. He seemed quite upset when we couldn't provide the information." Upset? I could picture Greg's face when the bank told him he had no access to his mother's financial information. No way to track her assets. No ability to monitor her spending. No power over her financial decisions. "Thank you for calling, David. You did exactly the right thing." Wednesday afternoon brought Lisa to my door, tears already flowing before I'd even answered the doorbell. "Mama, what's happening?" "The bank said, I can't access your accounts anymore, and the courthouse has some new paperwork that doesn't make any sense." I invited her in, made tea, and sat across from her at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped her with homework for 12 years, where I'd listened to her cry about boys and jobs and dreams that never quite materialized. "Lisa, sweetheart, I'm just organizing my affairs, making sure everything is clear and legal. But why isn't my name on anything anymore?" Such a telling question. Not "Are you okay?" or "What do you need?" Just "Why isn't my name on anything?" "Because, dear, I realized I needed to make some changes based on recent conversations." Lisa's tears stopped abruptly. "What conversations?" "The ones about putting me in a nursing home so you and Greg can liquidate my assets." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Lisa's face went through a series of expressions. Surprise, guilt, anger, and finally, calculation. Mama, that's not. We just want what's best for you. And what you think is best for me involves signing over power of attorney and moving to Magnolia Manor. You can't live alone forever. What if something happens? What if something happens to you, Lisa? Should I put you in an institution to keep you safe? She stood up abruptly. That's different. How? Because I'm not 82 years old. And there it was. The truth. She'd been hiding behind concern and tears. Age was a crime in her mind, a reason to strip away autonomy and dignity. You're right, sweetheart. You're 52, and in 30 years when you're 82, I hope your children treat you with more respect than you're showing me. Lisa left without finishing her tea. I watched from my window as she sat in her car for 10 minutes, probably calling Greg, probably planning their next move. That evening, my phone rang. Joey's number. Mum, Lisa called me. She's really upset. I imagine she is. She said you changed your will and cut them out. Not exactly, sweetheart. I just made some adjustments based on recent family dynamics. Silence. Then what kind of adjustments? The kind that protect me from children who think age makes me incompetent. More silence. When Joey spoke again, his voice was different, stronger. Mum, are Greg and Lisa trying to put you in a nursing home? They're trying to do what they think is best for their bank accounts. Jesus Christ. The anger in his voice was sharp and clean. I'm coming home. Joey, you don't need to. No, Mom, I do need to. I should have been there already. I should have been paying attention. Sweetheart, I'll be there Friday, and Mom, don't sign anything until I get there. After I hung up, I sat in Harold's chair and looked around my living room, at the books I'd collected over 82 years, at the photographs of a family that used to exist, at the life I'd built and was now having to defend. They thought they could dismantle me piece by piece, take away my independence, my choices, my dignity. What they didn't understand was that I'd spent 40 years organizing information, solving problems, and helping people navigate complex systems. I'd dealt with hostile city councils trying to cut library funding, with developers who wanted to tear down historic buildings, with bureaucrats who thought elderly librarians were easy targets. They'd all learnt the same lesson. Greg and Lisa were about to learn: never underestimate a librarian with a filing system and a grudge. I opened Harold's old address book and found the number I was looking for. Tommy Morrison, the young man who mowed my lawn, who happened to be Patricia Wells's nephew and David Chen's cousin. Charleston was a small town, and I'd been serving this community for 40 years. It was time to call in some favors. The war was just beginning. There's something poetic about serving the Last Supper in a garden, especially when you're about to bury a family that's already dead. I spent Friday morning preparing, not cooking. I'd ordered lunch from Hyman's Seafood, the same restaurant where Harold proposed 45 years ago, but preparing the stage for the performance of my lifetime. The garden table was set with my wedding china, disposed with tiny blue flowers that had survived 3 children and 43 years of family dinners, each place setting perfect, each water glass gleaming in the Charleston sunshine. Joey arrived first, driving a rental car and looking like he hadn't slept in days. My youngest child, my warrior son, still carrying himself like the soldier he'd been. When he hugged me, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: unconditional love. Mum, you look beautiful, he said, and meant it. Thank you, sweetheart. You look tired. I've been thinking about what you said on the phone, about Greg and Lisa. And I realized I've been a terrible son, staying away because it was easier than dealing with family drama, letting them handle things because I was too busy feeling sorry for myself. I cupped his face in my hands, this boy who'd been through war and divorce and still had enough heart left to feel shame for neglecting his mother. You're here now, I said. That's what matters. Greg and Lisa arrived together, walking into my garden like they owned it. Lisa carried a covered dish, some peace offering. No doubt, Greg brought his briefcase, because of course he did. Joey. Lisa embraced her younger brother with obvious relief. I'm so glad you came. We need to talk sense into Mama. Talk sense. As if I were a child having a tantrum instead of an elderly woman defending her autonomy. She's been making some very concerning decisions. Greg added, settling into his chair and immediately pulling out his phone. Financial decisions that don't make sense. Like what? Joey asked, his voice carefully neutral. Like removing us from her accounts. Like changing her will without discussing it with anyone. Like refusing to consider assisted living when she clearly needs supervision. Supervision. Like I was a criminal instead of their mother. I served lunch in silence, letting them talk around me as if I weren't there. It was a familiar dynamic. Eleanor Whitmore, invisible unless they needed something. The thing is, Lisa said, picking at her shrimp salad, we're worried about her judgment. She's been acting so strange lately. Strange how? Joey asked. Secretive. Defensive. She hired some nurse we've never met. She's been visiting lawyers without telling us, and now she's talking about changing her will to leave everything to strangers. Not strangers, I said quietly. People who care about me. Greg looked up from his phone. Mom, we care about you, that's why we're here. Is it, Gregory? Something in my tone made all three of them look at me directly for the first time since they'd arrived. Because I heard you last Sunday night, at your house, when you thought I wasn't there. Lisa went pale. Greg's phone slipped from his hand and landed on the garden table with a small crash. I heard you discussing my assets. I heard you planning to put me in Magnolia Manor. I heard you talking about power of attorney and real estate values and liquidating my property. Joey's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. What? And I heard you, Gregory, say the words that changed everything between us. Greg's face was white now, his confident businessman mask slipping. Mum, if you overheard something out of context, put her in a home. She's useless now anyway. The words fell into the garden like stones into still water, sending ripples of shock across my children's faces. That's what you said about your mother, Gregory. The woman who sacrificed her career to raise you. The woman who mortgaged her house to pay for your education. The woman who emptied her savings account every time you failed. Joey's chair scraped against the flagstones as he turned to stare at his older brother. You said that about Mum? It wasn't. I didn't mean. Greg was stammering now, the smooth financial planner reduced to a guilty child. What did you mean, Gregory? Lisa was crying again, but these weren't manipulative tears. These were tears of shame, of being caught, of realizing their mother had heard every cruel word. Mama, we were just frustrated. We've been so worried about you. Worried about my bank account, you mean? I reached into my purse and pulled out a small recording device, the one Clara had given me, the one that had captured Greg's phone call perfectly. Would you like to hear it again, Lisa? The part where Greg talks about accelerating the timeline, or maybe the part where you discuss my declines like it's a stock market projection. Joey's face was darkening with anger. Jesus Christ, what is wrong with you two? Joey, you don't understand. Greg started. I understand perfectly. You've been planning to steal from our mother. It's not stealing if we're trying to protect her assets. Protect them from what? From her? She's 82, not dead. I watched my sons face each other across my garden table, watched 40 years of sibling rivalry and resentment boil over into something cleaner and sharper. You want to know what I've decided? I said, and my voice cut through their argument like a blade. All three of them turned to me. I've sold the King Street property and the warehouse. The money is going into a trust for Joey's children, managed by Maya Chen. Greg's mouth opened, but no sound came out. This house will go to Clara Martinez when I die, along with the income from Harold's investments. Lisa made a sound like a wounded animal. Joey will receive the contents of the house, my personal papers, and Harold's military medals. Joey was staring at me with something between gratitude and horror. And Gregory and Lisa will each receive $10, with a note explaining that this represents the exact value they placed on their mother's life and dignity. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. Finally, Greg found his voice. You can't do this. I can. I have. And Maya has filed all the paperwork with the court. We'll contest it. We'll prove you're not competent to make these decisions. I smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd managed in weeks. Feel free to try, Gregory. I have recordings of our conversations, medical evaluations proving my competence, and a lawyer who specializes in elder abuse cases. Lisa stood up abruptly, her chair falling backward onto the flagstones. "This is insane, Mama. We're your children." "Yes," I said sadly. "You are, and that's the greatest disappointment of my 82 years." She ran then, through my garden and out the gate, leaving her purse and her pride behind. Greg gathered his briefcase with shaking hands. "This isn't over, Mom." "Yes, Gregory, it is." After they left, Joey and I sat in the garden as the afternoon light faded. He reached across the table and took my hand. "Mum, I'm so sorry. I should have been here. I should have protected you. Sweetheart, you couldn't have known. But I could have cared enough to find out." We sat there as the sun set over Charleston, two survivors of a family that had died long before anyone bothered to bury it. "What happens now?" Joey asked. I squeezed his hand and smiled. "Now we start over. They say justice is blind. What they don't tell you is that sometimes she opens her eyes and sees everything with perfect clarity." The papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a nervous young man who couldn't meet my eyes when he handed me the manila envelope. "Petition for emergency guardianship," the cover page read, "in the matter of Eleanor Whitmore, an alleged incapacitated person." Alleged incapacitated person. Gregory had reduced me to a legal terminology, a problem to be solved by the courts. I called Maya immediately. "They're claiming you're mentally incompetent and financially irresponsible," she explained after reviewing the documents. "They've submitted affidavits claiming you've been confused, forgetful, and making irrational financial decisions." "What kind of affidavits?" "Greg claims you called him repeatedly asking about the same doctor's appointment. Lisa says you left the stove on overnight and seemed confused when she visited. They've even gotten a statement from that nursing home sales representative saying you appeared disoriented during their meeting. Every lie carefully crafted, every fabrication designed to paint me as a danger to myself and others. Maya, what do we need to prove? That you're competent to manage your own affairs. That means medical evaluation, cognitive testing, and demonstrating that your financial decisions are rational and considered. Then let's get started." Dr. Rebecca Martinez, Clara's cousin, as it turned out, conducted my psychological evaluation at her office on Meeting Street. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with intelligent eyes and the kind of calm competence that reminded me of the best reference librarians I'd ever worked with. "Mrs. Whitmore, I want you to know that this evaluation is completely confidential unless you choose to release it. Take your time with every question and don't hesitate to ask for clarification." For 3 hours she tested my memory, my reasoning, my ability to manage complex information, mathematics problems, word associations, detailed questions about my personal history and current living situation. "Can you tell me about your financial assets?" she asked. I listed them methodically: the house on Rutledge Avenue, the income from Harold's investments, the municipal bonds from Uncle Robert's estate, the rental income from properties I'd managed for 15 years. "And your recent decision to change your will, can you explain your reasoning?" "My children have demonstrated that they view me as an impediment to their financial security rather than as a person deserving of respect and autonomy. I've chosen to leave my assets to people who value me as a human being rather than as a source of inheritance." Dr. Martinez made notes, asked follow-up questions, tested my understanding of complex legal and financial concepts. When we finished, she looked at me with something like admiration. "Mrs. Whitmore, your cognitive function is not only normal for your age, it's exceptional. Your reasoning is clear, your memory is sharp, and your decision-making process shows careful consideration of multiple factors. Will you testify to that in court?" "Absolutely." The hearing was set for the following Friday at Charleston County Courthouse. Maya filed our response, including Dr. Martinez's evaluation, Clara's affidavit about my daily functioning, and the recorded conversations that proved Greg and Lisa's true motivations. Thursday night, Joey called from his hotel room. "Mum, are you ready for tomorrow?" "As ready as I can be, sweetheart." Greg called me. He's still trying to get me to support their petition. And I told him if he ever speaks to me again, I'll break his nose. I laughed for the first time in weeks. "Joey, you can't solve family problems with violence." Maybe not, but it felt good to say it. Friday morning dawned clear and bright, Charleston sunshine streaming through my bedroom windows like a blessing. I dressed carefully, my best navy suit, Harold's wedding ring on a chain around my neck, and the pearl earrings he'd given me for our 25th anniversary. If my children wanted to see me in court, they'd see Eleanor Whitmore at her best. The courthouse was exactly as I remembered from my research trips years ago, imposing, formal, designed to make ordinary people feel small. But I wasn't feeling small that morning. I was feeling like a woman who'd spent 40 years serving justice in her own quiet way, who understood that truth had a weight that outweighed any legal maneuvering. Judge Patricia Holloway was a woman about my age, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with a reputation for fairness and a low tolerance for nonsense. Maya had chosen our venue wisely. Greg and Lisa sat with their lawyer, an expensive-suited man who looked like he specialized in separating families from their money. They wouldn't meet my eyes when I entered the courtroom. The proceedings began with Greg's testimony, calm, confident, describing a mother who was declining rapidly and making concerning decisions that suggested cognitive impairment. She removed us from her bank accounts without explanation, he testified. She's been secretive about her finances, talking to lawyers behind our backs and making irrational changes to her estate planning. Lisa followed, tears flowing on cue, describing her beloved mother's confusion and forgetfulness. She seems angry all the time now, suspicious of people who love her. It breaks my heart to see her this way. Performance worthy of community theatre, both of them. Then Maya stood up. Your Honor, may I present Dr. Rebecca Martinez, clinical psychologist. Dr. Martinez testified about my evaluation, reading from her detailed report. Mrs. Whitmore demonstrated excellent cognitive function, clear reasoning ability, and sophisticated understanding of complex financial and legal concepts. Her decision-making process shows careful consideration of relevant factors and logical progression from evidence to conclusion. In your professional opinion, is Mrs. Whitmore competent to manage her own affairs? Completely competent. Her cognitive function exceeds the average for her age group. Next, Clara took the stand. Calm, professional, describing our weekly interactions with the precision of a trained observer. Mrs. Whitmore manages her medications independently, maintains her home beautifully, handles complex financial correspondence, and demonstrates excellent judgment in daily living activities. She's one of the most mentally sharp clients I've ever worked with. Then Maya played the recordings. Greg's voice filled the courtroom. Put her in a home, she's useless now anyway. Lisa whispering about liquidating assets and real estate values. Their lawyer's discussion of legal strategies to override my autonomy. Judge Holloway's face grew sterner with each recording. I've heard enough, she said. This petition appears to be motivated not by concern for Mrs. Whitmore's welfare, but by financial interest in her estate. The evidence shows a competent adult making rational decisions about her own life and property. She turned to me. Mrs. Whitmore, would you like to address the court? I stood up, feeling Harold's strength in my spine, my mother's dignity in my shoulders. Your Honor, I've spent 82 years taking care of other people. I raised 3 children, buried a husband, served my community for 4 decades. I've earned the right to make my own decisions about how I spend the years I have left. My voice carried clearly through the courtroom. I'm not a burden to be managed or an asset to be liquidated. I'm a human being who deserves to live with dignity and autonomy until the day I die. Judge Holloway nodded approvingly. Petition denied, she said firmly. Mrs. Whitmore has demonstrated complete competence to manage her own affairs. Furthermore, I'm troubled by the motivations underlying this petition. Attempting to strip an elderly person of their autonomy for financial gain borders on elder abuse. She looked at Greg and Lisa with obvious disdain. I suggest you examine your consciences and consider what kind of legacy you want to leave with your mother. As we left the courthouse, Joey put his arm around my shoulders. Mum, I'm so proud of you. Thank you, sweetheart. But we're not finished yet. Because winning in court was just the beginning. Now it was time to make sure my victory became public record. There's something deeply satisfying about watching justice unfold in public, especially when you've been underestimated for 82 years. The Charleston Post and Courier ran the story on Sunday morning. Local family's guardianship attempt fails. Judge cites elder abuse concerns. Maya had made sure they got all the details. The recordings, the failed nursing home scheme, Greg's useless comment that had started it all. I was having coffee in my garden when Mrs. Patterson called. "Eleanor, I just read the newspaper. I had no idea what those children of yours were planning." "Neither did I, Helen, until I overheard them." "Well, I hope you gave them what for. Some children need to be reminded that their parents are people, not property." By noon my phone had rung 12 times. Old friends from the library, neighbours from the historic district, people I'd helped over the years who wanted me to know they were on my side. Charleston might be a big city now, but it still had a small town sense of justice. Tommy Morrison knocked on my door that afternoon, hat in hand, and looking embarrassed. "Mrs. Whitmore, I just wanted to say, well, my whole family read about what happened. We think you're about the bravest lady in Charleston." "Thank you, Tommy. That means more than you know. My grandmother says if you ever need anything at all, you just call us. We don't forget people who treated us right." Monday brought a formal ceremony I'd been planning for weeks. Maya had arranged for the reading of my new will to be held at the Charleston County Library, the same library where I'd worked for 38 years, in the same meeting room where I'd fought budget battles and defended programs for underserved communities. It wasn't traditional, but Maya assured me it was perfectly legal. "Public reading of wills is an old Charleston tradition," she said, "and you have every right to make your intentions clear while you're alive to explain them." The meeting room was full. Clara sat in the front row with Sophia, both of them dressed in their Sunday best. Joey sat beside them, looking proud and slightly stunned. Mrs. Patterson and Tommy Morrison represented my neighborhood supporters. Several former library colleagues had come, along with Maya's legal associates and a few local reporters. Greg and Lisa were notably absent. I stood at the podium where I'd given countless presentations about literacy programs and community outreach, looking out at faces that reflected respect instead of pity, admiration instead of concern for my decline. "Friends," I began, my voice clear and strong, "I've asked you here today to witness the reading of my final will and testament, not because I'm dying, but because I'm finally living." A murmur of approval rippled through the room. For too many years I let other people define my worth by what I could give them. I measured my success as a mother by how much I sacrificed for my children, even when those sacrifices went unappreciated and unremembered. I paused, looking at Clara, who was wiping tears from her eyes. "But I've learned something important in these past few months. Family isn't just about blood. It's about choice. It's about respect. It's about seeing people for who they are, instead of what they can provide." Maya stood up and began reading the formal language of the will. The house on Rutledge Avenue, with all its contents and memories, would go to Clara Martinez, who showed me kindness when my own children showed me calculation. The income from Harold's investments would fund a scholarship program for single mothers pursuing healthcare degrees, administered through the College of Charleston nursing program. Joey would receive Harold's personal effects, my collection of first edition books, and a trust fund for his children's education. Greg and Lisa would each receive $10, representing the value they placed on their mother's autonomy and dignity. But the real surprise came at the end. The bulk of Mrs. Whitmore's estate, Maya read, including the proceeds from the sale of 2 properties and the municipal bonds from her uncle's inheritance, will establish the Eleanor Whitmore Center for Elder Dignity, a legal aid fund to protect elderly citizens from financial abuse by family members. The room erupted in applause. Clara was crying openly now, and even Joey looked stunned. I took the podium again. $2,300,000, I said clearly. That's what Greg and Lisa tried to steal from me by claiming I was incompetent. Instead, it will help other elderly people fight back against children who see their parents as ATM machines instead of human beings. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, as people filtered out with handshakes and hugs, Clara approached me with Sophia in her arms. "Mrs. Eleanor, I don't know what to say. Say you'll take good care of the house. Say you'll remember that kindness matters more than blood. Always," she whispered. "Always." Sophia reached out her little arms to me. "Abuela Eleanor, are you going to live with us now?" "No, sweetheart. I'm going to live in my house until I can't anymore, but I'm giving it to your mama so you'll always have a safe place to live." Joey waited until the room was nearly empty before approaching. Mum, I don't deserve any of this. I wasn't here when you needed me. But you're here now, and you defended me when it mattered. What about Greg and Lisa? Do you think they'll ever understand? I looked out the library windows at the Charleston street, where I'd walked to work for 38 years, where I'd built a life of service and dignity that my children had tried to reduce to dollars and cents. I don't know, sweetheart. But that's not my problem anymore. That evening, as I sat in Harold's chair reading a book, my phone rang, an unknown number. Mrs. Whitmore, this is Margaret Chen, with the Charleston City Council. We've been following your story in the news, and we wondered if you'd be interested in speaking at our next meeting about elder rights and family financial abuse. I smiled, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. I'd be honored. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's showing the world who you really are. And I was just getting started. They say the best stories end where they began, but with everything changed. I'm sitting in the same chair where this all started, in the same house Harold and I made our home, but I'm not the same woman who once worried about being useful. 6 months have passed since the library ceremony. 6 months of discovering who Eleanor Whitmore really is when she's not trying to be what other people need. The morning light streams through my kitchen windows, just like it did that first day when I waited for Greg's call. But now my phone rings with invitations instead of obligations. Yesterday it was the Charleston Historical Society, asking me to speak about preserving family records. Tuesday it was the College of Charleston, wanting me to mentor their new scholarship recipients. Next week, I'm addressing the South Carolina State Legislature about elder abuse protection laws. People listen to me now. Not because I'm someone's mother or someone's widow, but because I'm Eleanor Whitmore, the woman who stood up to her own children and won. Clara stops by every Wednesday, not as my nurse anymore but as my friend. Sophia calls me Abuela Eleanor and brings me pictures she draws at preschool, stick figures of our little family gathered around my kitchen table. In her 3-year-old world, family is simply the people who love you and show up when you need them. If only it were that simple for everyone. Joey moved back to Charleston last month. He bought a small house 3 blocks away and visits every Sunday for dinner. We're learning to be friends instead of just mother and son, sharing stories about his military service and my library years that we never had time for when he was growing up. You know what I realized, he said last Sunday, helping me wash dishes. I spent so many years being angry about my divorce, about my mistakes, that I forgot you were dealing with your own grief after Dad died. We all process loss differently, sweetheart. But I should have been there for you. Greg and Lisa, they saw opportunity where I just saw my own problems. I've learned to accept his apologies without minimizing his guilt. Some lessons come at the cost of missing important moments, and that's a price that can't be refunded, only acknowledged. The Eleanor Whitmore Center for Elder Dignity opened its doors in April. Maya runs it with a staff of 3 lawyers and 2 social workers, funded by the interest from my municipal bonds and donations from people who read about our story in the papers. They've helped 17 families so far. Elderly people whose children were stealing their Social Security checks. Grandparents whose medical decisions were being overridden by family members more interested in inheritance than care. Widowers being pressured to sign over property by relatives who saw them as burdens. Every case breaks my heart and fills it simultaneously. The heartbreak for what they're enduring, the fullness for knowing they now have somewhere to turn. Last week I received a letter that made me cry, not from sadness but from recognition. Dear Mrs. Whitmore, it began. My name is Dorothy Richardson, and I'm 78 years old. My son and daughter-in-law have been telling me I need to move to a nursing home, but I don't want to leave my house. After reading about your story in the newspaper, I realized I don't have to let them decide for me. I called your center, and they're helping me understand my rights. Thank you for showing me that being old doesn't mean being powerless. Dorothy Richardson, 78 years old, and learning the same lesson I learned at 82, it's never too late to reclaim your power. Greg and Lisa have been conspicuously absent from my new life. Greg's financial planning business took a hit when word spread about the guardianship attempt. Apparently, people don't trust their retirement funds to someone who tried to steal from his own mother. Lisa moved to Atlanta last month. Joey says she's been telling people I've lost my mind and that he's enabling me. I don't miss their phone calls. I don't miss the tension of waiting for them to need something, the exhaustion of measuring my worth by what I could provide. What I do miss, what I'll always miss, is the hope that they might have chosen love over money, respect over control. But hope is a luxury I can't afford to waste on people who've shown me exactly who they are. This morning I received a small envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Mum, I'm sorry. I know sorry isn't enough, and I know you probably won't forgive me, but I needed you to know that I understand now what we tried to take from you. It wasn't just your money or your house. It was your dignity, your right to choose, your worth as a person. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I see what we did, and I'm ashamed, Lisa. I sat with that letter for a long time, feeling the weight of an apology that comes too late to change anything, but might be early enough to heal something small. I won't respond. Not yet, and maybe not ever. But I folded it carefully and put it in Harold's desk drawer, next to the photographs of the family we used to be. Some doors, once closed, can never be reopened. But forgiveness doesn't require an open door. Sometimes it just requires letting go of the key. Tonight I'm giving a speech at the Charleston Library's annual fundraiser, the same library where I spent 38 years, where I fought for literacy programs and community access, where I learned that information is power and education is freedom. My speech is called, I Wasn't Useless, I Was Just Quiet. It's about the difference between being overlooked and being invisible, between being underestimated and being undervalued. It's about the voice that emerges when you stop trying to please everyone and start trying to honor yourself. Clara will be there with Sophia, who insists on wearing her fancy dress to see Abuela Eleanor talk to the important people. Joey will be there too, proud and protective, still learning how to love without guilt. Maya will introduce me, probably mentioning the center and the legal precedents we've set. The reporters will ask about reconciliation with my other children, about whether I regret my decisions, about what advice I have for other elderly people facing similar situations. I'll tell them what I've learned. Aging doesn't diminish your right to dignity. Being someone's parent doesn't make you their property. And sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born with. But mostly I'll tell them about the morning light in my kitchen, about sitting in Harold's chair with a good book, about the peace that comes from knowing you stood up for yourself when it mattered most. I'll tell them about Sophia's drawings and Joey's Sunday visits, and Clara's friendship that saved me from the loneliness I didn't even know I was carrying. I'll tell them about the letters from people like Dorothy Richardson, about the dignity we're restoring one case at a time, about the legacy that matters more than any inheritance. And then I'll come home to this house that will be Clara's someday, to this garden Harold and I planted together, to this life I've finally learned to live for myself. At 82 years old, I'm not slowing down. I'm just getting started.